Friends, I thought I would do another fun bread recipe here. The recipe I have for making soft pretzels is actually pretty easy and a fun little treat right now. And to be honest, when I go to the store, I never get hot dog buns because anytime we have hot dogs for dinner, I wrap them in the pretzel dough. So I'm going to show you some of that right now. So just like before, I'm going to go ahead and get some warm water to activate my active dry yeast. I did read something this week that it's possible that I might not need to get it activating, that I can use it just like instant yeast and dump it in. But since this is the way I've always done it and it works, I'm going to keep doing it for now. So I'm going to get a cup of warm water. And then I'm going to do 1.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. So if you're using instant yeast, this would be just 1 teaspoon of instant yeast. So there's my 1.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. And then this recipe doesn't actually use salt in the dough, we'll put it on top, but it does use brown sugar in the dough. So we'll go ahead and get that now. So it's 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. And this will actually, yeast has a sweet tooth, as it were, and so adding sugar to the mix right now should get the yeast starting to activate even faster as it eats it up and starts to get excited. So there's 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. And I'm just going to swirl it around a little bit and then let it activate and come back in a few minutes. Alright, so because of the brown sugar that was added to the mix, it's already activated the yeast, if you can see at that angle. So we'll go ahead and add the flour. So we'll add 3 cups of flour. And actually for this recipe I do normally just use all-purpose flour. I don't find any need for bread flour here. 3. Alright. So I will mix that up. Just to note again, this recipe only takes those few ingredients. So it's the flour, the yeast, and the brown sugar with the water. So like any other bread dough, I'll go ahead and start it to mix. Once it's incorporated enough that it's not going to splash stuff everywhere, I'll go ahead and put it up to speed 2 to knead it for several minutes. And then I'll show you what the next steps are after that. Alright, I think it looks good, so let's check it out. We're going to try that window pane test. I had a little piece of brown sugar hardened in the dough, so we'll just set that up. This dough should be a little bit stickier than other bread doughs. Both the lack of salt and the addition of sugar will make that so. So now we're just trying that window pane test where we're trying to see light through it as we gently stretch it out. And while we're getting a tear there, that's okay. I can still see light through the rest of the stretched dough, and it looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that off. Before we go further though, and I'll direct the camera down to the counter so you can see what I'm doing there. This recipe doesn't actually require any rising, either a first fermentation or a second rise for proofing. So it's actually much faster than normal bread recipes. So we did the mixing and the kneading. We're going to go straight into shaping. And then from shaping, we're going to go straight into a pan of simmering baking soda water, and from there into the oven. So before we start shaping, you'll want to go ahead and start the oven preheating to 425 and start your baking soda water heating up. I have a pretty deep pan here that works very well for me for the boiling part of the pretzels. If you don't have a nice deep pan like this, a pot's going to work just fine. So what I did is I filled it about halfway with water. I pretty much just need enough water to cover the pretzels once they've been put in. And to this solution of, I'd say I have about 3 or 4 cups of water in here, I added about a tablespoon of baking soda. So that's going to, the boiling in the baking soda solution is going to give it that nice, smooth, chewy exterior and give it that slight tang flavor that we associate with pretzels. I believe commercial recipes actually use lye for this. I keep baking soda in my house, and that works just about as well. So that's what we're doing here. So tablespoon of baking soda in the water solution. I'm going to start that boiling, and I have the oven preheating to 425. So now we can begin the shaping. So we'll go ahead and get that going. Like I said, this dough is a little bit stickier than normal dough, but that's okay. I also, for the 2 of us that I usually cook for, I usually only make a half batch. So I'm just going to divide this and set that aside for another time. Then with the rest of this, I'm going to use some of it to wrap the hot dogs for dinner, and a little bit then to make some normal pretzels. So I'm just, I don't have an exact method here. I just start dividing the dough. I would say that in general, this recipe would make 8 decent sized soft pretzels. So with the half that I have left, I've divided it into 4 parts, roughly. And then I'm going to start just rolling out snakes of dough. So I'm going to start all 4 of them and then set them aside to let them relax just a moment before I try to take them a little bit further. And as you can see, I kind of start in the middle and then just gently work my way out with both hands. Set that guy aside. Number 3 here, start in the middle, work my way out. Alright, set that aside. Number 4. If I didn't stop, so this one you can see is starting to try to tear right there. If I tried to keep going and stretch it further, it would just break, but I'm going to let it rest and then come back to it. So going back to strand number 1, roll it out a little bit more. And I know that this is going to be longer than I need for the hot dogs, so I'm not really worrying as much about this end because I know that that's going to be beyond what I need. So now that I have it, I'd say it's roughly the thickness of my pinky finger. This is about the size that I like to do for wrapping my hot dogs in. So, and I actually like using cheddar wurst for a little extra flavor. So, basically just take the end of the hot dog and place it at the end of the strand of pretzel. Roll it once so you can press the end up against the dough, and then continue to roll it in a spiral, just trying to get the spiral to rest right next to itself. It's okay if there's little gaps like this in the dough. And then just keep rolling it along until you reach the other end of the dough. And then I'm just going to kind of press it, tear off the extra, and just gently attach the dough to itself there. And then give it a little roll on the counter to seal any gaps in the dough. And then, since my baking soda solution is not quite ready yet, I will set that aside and begin the next dog here. So finish prepping this strand to get it about the thickness of my pinky finger. it up, press the end onto the dough, and then keep rolling the spiral along. And then at the end, just tear off what I don't need, set it aside, and press the rest of the dough down, and then roll the whole dog just a couple times back and forth. And then next dog, I'm going to end up doing 3 pretzel dogs, and then I'll make 2 pretzels out of the remaining dough. All right. So press the end to the dough and then keep rotating to spiral it around. Oops, that's a bigger gap, so just taking it back. My oven is preheated. Alright, tearing off what I don't need, pressing it down, rolling it to seal any gaps, set that aside. Okay, so now you can do this a couple of different ways. Just attach the strings onto here. I think I'm actually just going to go ahead and combine them all together. This is for making the 2 normal pretzels now. So I'm just going to kind of take all of the dough that we have left, divide it into 2, and start those snakes again for the 2 pretzels. Set that aside. I think one is going to be just slightly bigger than the other, but that is all right. Set that aside. All right, and I know that professional pretzel makers have a fancy way of doing this where they like pick it up and let it twist and then fling it down. I've never perfected that skill. So all I do is I hold the dough like this on the counter, let it start to make the U down below, and then I bring the 2 ends up and I twist them so that's a half turn around each other, and then go again. And then I'm left with a shape that looks like this, and I'm just going to pull the ends down then over the bottom loop. And then I have my pretzel. So set that down. So it's a couple of extra steps from what the pros do, but I'm happy with it. There we go. All right. So if we can then move over to the pan here, I'm just going to use a normal slotted spatula for this. And it really does need to be simmering, which we're very close to here, so I'll just come back in another minute or 2 when we do have a simmer. All right, so now we have a simmer going. So I'll go ahead and get the dogs into the pan here. Since they've been sitting on the counter, they're a little bit sticky, but that's okay. All right, so I'll just gently drop it in. For the pretzels, we're going to want about a minute per side, so we'll flip them over after about a minute. For the dogs, they're round, so we'll just give them a full 2 minutes in the pan, gently rotating them around as we go. So the water just about covers, but just to make sure that the heating on the dough is even, I'll just keep poking them a little bit, and we'll give them a good 2 minutes in this baking soda bath. All right, so the dogs have had about 2 minutes in the bath, so I'm going to go ahead and pull my pan that's been preheating out of the oven. And get them out and straight onto the pan. Hee. Now, one thing I should have mentioned before, that these cheddar wursts that I am using are pre-cooked. I definitely would only do this wrapping in dough and cooking in this manner if you're working with already cooked meats. I don't believe that sausages or brats would cook enough in this manner without having been pre-grilled. So just wanted to make sure to note that. All right, these are going to take a little bit longer than the normal pretzels, so I'll go ahead and get them in the oven before starting to boil the next guys. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and get these sticky little monsters. I probably should have put them on an oiled sheet, but that's okay. So I'm going ahead and getting these into the simmering water. And like I said, we're going to do, for these ones, a minute per side. So I'll make sure that we're simmering, let it go for a minute, and then I'll flip them over, let them go for another minute, and then we'll get them onto the sheet as well. Okay, so our twisty pretzels are ready. So I'll go ahead and get the pan back out real quick. Take these straight from the pan over to the baking sheet. And then of course we can't forget the last important step before putting this back in the oven, and that would be the adding of the salt. These are pretzels, right? So now, while they're still damp from the water, use coarse sea salt. So this is the kind I use. It's the only kind of coarse sea salt I can find at my grocery store. You can find another kind, go for it. So then just sprinkle it on in whatever amount you like. As you'll notice, I typically don't salt the pretzel dogs, but definitely salt the twisty guys. Or if you prefer other toppings, you can leave them unsalted here, and then after they come out of the oven, you can brush butter on them and then add other toppings, either salt at that point, or sugar cinnamon, or whatever other toppings you're interested in. So now, we'll go ahead and put them back in, and I believe they go for about 15 minutes at this point. I'll make sure to time it. All right, it has been 15 minutes and I think they are done. So, some nice browning. So, because there are two of us, these do tend to stick just a little bit, so I do use a metal spatula in case it needs a little prying. So if you're using a metal sheet pan, I would most definitely grease it. Even if you put parchment down, grease that, because the baking soda, as you may know, is a cleaning agent. It gets rid of grease. So if you're putting it on even a stoneware pan that's been used for a long time, the baking soda starts to remove that grease layer, and so that's why I'm getting a little bit of sticking, but it's not bad. All right. So now we have our very tasty dinner. Oops. Where we each get a little bit of cheddar wurst, a little pretzel, and some greens on the side.